It's courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the judgment that something is more important than the fear. And when I think of it, it's really how I live my life. You have to make that judgment call. Yeah, you feel afraid, but what is more important here? Your judgment that something is more important than the fear that you feel. And when you can get a hold of that fear, when you can become the boss of your fear, the boss of Fred, as I tell people, then you can move mountains. You can do things you never, ever thought you could ever do. And the growth that comes from that is phenomenal. You won't even know yourself in a year.
Welcome to another episode of the What If You Could podcast. Was that an earthquake? What was that shaking? Welcome to another episode of the What If You Could podcast. I'm your host, Gary Scott, and today my effervescent guest is Bernice McDonald. Hello, Bernice McDonald.
Hello, Gary. So nice to meet you and nice to be here.
Yeah, we're going to give a lot of people some hope. And we're going to give them some learning and stuff. So I can't wait to jump in. So, real quick, I'm going to go through Bernice's bio. So, everybody, who's this who we're playing with today? Bernice McDonald is a life strategist for getting through the hard things life throws at you. Someone who helps people find their courage when life doesn't go according to plan. Through her tiny, brave steps method, Bernice guides others to stop fighting fear, make peace with what is, and take the next small step that changes everything. She's the author of the Little Book of Courage series, including Brave Enough to Be Myself and Brave Enough to Let Go, and the creator of the Tiny Brave Steps Generator, a free online tool that helps you find your next act of courage in under a minute. Bernice believes courage isn't the absence of fear, it's taking one tiny, brave step while still scared. Her work has inspired many to face loss, change, and disappointment with grace, hope, and strength. If you've ever wondered how to quiet that voice, and we all have, that says not enough, and finally move forward with confidence, you are going to love any conversation you have with Bernice. Starting with this one. We're going to start right here.
Wow.
Well,
Thank
welcome,
you so
welcome, my friend.
much.
I was impressed. I'm like, wow, she's going to talk to me. This is going to be cool. But that's just the tip of the iceberg of you, my friend. I mean, I've got I love that word plethora. I've got a plethora of rabbit holes I've gone up for you. But like I threatened, I promise I'll shut up. We are the What If You Could podcast. So I asked all my guests the same question. Bernice McDonald, what is your what if you could?
Well, first of all, let me say, I love that question. I just love it because I really love going on adventures. So, that suits that kind of thing very well. But when I thought about this, I thought, what if you could feel the fear and just go ahead and do it anyway?
Yeah, easier said than done, right? Actually, there's an amazing book, I think from the 80s. Susan Jeffers wrote a book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyways. I
Yeah.
got it somewhere on my shelf. Great book. Um, but it's so much easier said than done, isn't it?
Oh, you got that right. I mean, life is full of opportunities to test that out too, because we probably feel fear, I don't know how many times a day. It's not all about, like, you were just talking about the earthquake there. It's not all about going through earthquakes. I call them bombs that drop on you, boulders that fall on you out of the blue, pin you down for a while. It's not all, it can be more about things like rocks getting thrown at you, like criticism, judgment, people not understanding you. I mean, we're faced every day with things that challenge us and ask us, what do I do here? Do I go ahead or do I let fear talk to me and talk me out of it? And many, many of us decide on the safe route because he said it's just easier.
We get bombarded with, what did they say, 70,000 negative thoughts a day or something like that. I
Mhm.
mean, a, a bizarre amount of
Wow.
negative self-talk that we fight, right? But it's funny you mentioned boulders because after my wife passed and my life was a complete disaster. I took up one of those huge stickies and I wrote on it, boulders in my river. And I said, these are all the boulders I need to remove from my life so that I could get the flow back, right?
Uh,
And a few months ago, I was talking to a gal named Meredith Alexander, whose daughter almost died from a boulder falling out of nowhere and hitting her, right? It's
literally.
crazy story.
Oh,
And she said, Gary, you don't need to remove the boulders. You just need to learn how to navigate around them like a
yeah.
leaf in the stream. And I'm like, dude, where were you 10 years ago?
Yes. That is so true. I was thinking that too. Water flows around the boulders. So, if you're
Uh,
willing to see the path, but so often what happens to us is that we get stuck, hung up on the boulder and think we have to remove it. We're not looking at what other options we have, what other tiny brave steps, as I put it, that there are to take us in a different direction from that boulder or to work with the boulder, like to just inch our way around it until we're on the other side.
yeah.
Lots of options for us, but we don't.
And then it hit me. I live in Southern California and we have a cabin up in a lake called Big Bear Lake. And we go jumping off these huge boulders into the lake all the time. And then I start thinking, why don't we just take these massive boulders and just go doing backflips on them and have fun with these boulders instead of making them an obstacle. And that's kind of what you do, with your tiny brave steps as I was going through all these things. I love all this. Like I said, I just got a couple of your books. I love this, but you didn't start there.
Awesome.
This wasn't like you woke up. I mean, you were born and flying out of the womb. You're like, I'm this, yay, I'm all this. I mean, you kind of had to go the hard way before you got here.
Oh, yeah. In fact, I call myself one of the most, scared people alive. And, like, I lived in fear. I was growing, but I really lived in fear and afraid to be myself, mostly, until I went through my divorce when I was, about 49 or 50. And those 6 years in between my marriages were a journey of courage and a journey of waking up. That's where I had to face, I mean, I was terrified. I was the one who chose to leave my marriage. I made that decision, and I felt very, good about that decision because I had given my marriage everything I had, 24 years. I had tried and, you know, focused on myself and did everything I could to become the person that I needed to be within that marriage, but it just wasn't working, and, when my youngest daughter was ready to leave home, I really had to ask myself, "Is this the way I wanna live for the rest of my life?" And so, at that time, I decided to leave. I mean, that was probably one of the bravest steps I've ever taken. And through that time, though, I made so many mistakes because I was operating from my scared self, my fearful self. And so I made terrible mistakes and I became someone I didn't even recognize. And yet I think it was the person that was, that I had been all along underneath, but I was always living from fear. And so there was a real metamorphosis, I call it. Like,
Mm.
talk about it wasn't even really going into a cocoon. It was more like getting slammed around to the place where I had to wake up and realize, who do I want to be? Is this the person I want to be? And I thought, "No, I don't wanna be the woman who's chasing other men. I don't wanna be the woman who's accepting, you know, men that are, you know."
Leftovers. You don't want the
Exactly.
leftovers.
And really, that was the whole beauty of that time, is that I really discovered who I was and more importantly, what I wanted. So I I found out, like, really thinking that through. What do I want? And if I want that, who am I gonna have to be in order to
Mm.
have that? And so that really was like a huge eye-opening experience. And by the time I met my now husband, I was ready. No, are we ever ready? But I was at a place where I could say, this is what I want and I won't accept anything less because I
Mm.
respect myself and I believe in myself. And so this is what I need to do to protect me. And so I set high standards and I set, like they weren't really rules, but they were rules. Like, okay, this is if you're like this, sorry, we're not going there. If you have this habit and this habit, I bless you. I wish you well, but I just can't have that in my life. you know? So
Yeah.
my husband, oh, he was such a I had been praying for all those 6 years. God, don't you have any knights in shining armor out there anymore? Are there not? Can you not just send me one knight? And the funny thing is when I met my husband, my car wouldn't start. I live in Canada. It was like 30 below Fahrenheit, Celsius. So my car it was the third time that winter my car wouldn't start because I kept leaving the lights on. That was my fault. But anyways, I was calling for a tow truck and I calling my daughter to say, "Do you have booster cables?" And he happened to be in the door of the pharmacy waiting for something to be for an order to come up for him, and he overheard me and he offered to help. And so I had to think real quick because I was learning to be brave, but I was also protecting myself. And I thought, well, we're in a public place. It's all good. Yeah. Yes, please. If you could help me, that would be wonderful. That's how we met. And we laugh about it because
Mm.
he helped me. He actually couldn't get my car going, which was extremely humiliating for him. It needed a new battery. But he said to me that night, he said, if you go, because my daughter had come by then, and he said, "If you go get a new battery, I will come back tomorrow morning and put that battery in for you." And, I thought, "Oh, that's the sweetest thing?" And then just to make that story kinda tie that loop, I thought he was married, of course, because he's, older and he was, somebody called him while we were there, and so, to thank him, I had tickets, to a concert that I was not going to because I had finally broken up with a man who was not treating me well, taking a stand for myself. So I gave him the tickets in a card, and I said, "Thank you so much. Take your wife and have a wonderful evening." Well, he called me and he said, "Actually, my wife passed away a year ago, and I could not possibly accept these tickets if you did not come with me." And so that was how we started, but we always joke because he was my knight in shining armor who rescued me that night. So,
Uh,
but
I
that's
love that story. Love
well,
that story.
it's kind of the full picture. That period of time where I went from being very afraid to finding my courage and what it took to find my courage and then to stand up for myself. And then the happy ending that I got because of that. And really I have never looked back. I live totally as myself again. I learned to laugh again, which I had not done really laugh for so long. And that it just became a freedom, and with him, he just has always let me be totally myself, you know? We've been married almost I guess we just passed our 14th anniversary, so we've had a long time together, and, we just love being in love together, like, really, it was meant to be, and I really and because we both stand up for ourselves, we both have a good relationship where we can talk openly and freely about that, and we can also talk a lot about fear, when we're afraid. We're not afraid to admit that to each other or to even say, "That was really I d that was a stupid thing I did, but I think I was afraid of dot, 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 you know?
You know, it's funny, you opened up so many things with that story. It's a great story, but you know, you sometimes you have to go through, I call them crash and burn missions. Sometimes you got to do a bunch of crash and burn missions before you kind of say, this doesn't feel good anymore. I don't want to keep doing these crash and burn missions. And I keep experience the same thing over and over, you know, because this is where I see myself. Because this is what I see that I am, this is what I keep experiences of these same things. But I think when you said the metamorphosis, I love the story about the caterpillar and the butterfly, right? You know, the caterpillar goes through this excruciating process to become this big pile of goo, and then becomes this big, beautiful butterfly, right? And I tell everybody I'm in the goo stage right now. I'm just a big, beautiful, colorful pile of goo. But the good news is I've made it this far, right? And I'm not dead yet. So
Yeah.
I have a very good feeling that the butterfly is coming soon. And that's what I loved when I was reading through your books and I was reading through your, you know, the little books of courage and about the tiny brave steps. And then, you know, you manifested that guy. You manifested your white knight. But how he showed up was awesome.
I know. I know. And I really believe you like, we get what we look for, and we get what we will fight for too, because, I mean, that when I met him, and this is the same, again, another metaphor of everything that comes at us in life that raises that fear in us. We can look at that situation and say, "Do I go forward or do I back off?" And I must have, in the first few months that we were getting to know each other, I had a lot of moments like that. But I have to say, that started way back when I even started dating again, because I mean, how scary is that? You must know because you've been, yeah. I mean, it's been so long. And all of a sudden, there you are out there vulnerable and getting to know people and you learn a lot about yourself in that time. And I have actually, I was training as a coach at the time that I left my marriage. And so what I decided to do was to get into relationship coaching because I needed to learn what I didn't know about relationships. And so I took some really awesome coaching courses to train to work with people in relationships. But and so I kind of steered at that time into coaching women who were going through divorce the same as I was. But what I found was many of them were so scared of so much. They were stuck. They literally, it was like their feet were frozen to the sidewalk, like they were so afraid of every little thing that happened, and afraid of having conversations, and afraid of being taken advantage of, and afraid of, like, when you live like that, you are frozen in time, I used to call it. I did get right away from relationship coaching because I found it was very frustrating for me, and it triggered a lot of things for me. And there were so many people that just weren't willing to move. They wanted to know how, but they just weren't willing to actually, find out about themselves and believe in themselves first of all, which I totally believe is something you have to do before you can go into another relationship. But they also, their lack of they weren't interested in really building that trust again, and in really becoming, becoming their own person so that they could make the choices on their own rather than always waiting to be chosen. So, I
Yeah,
think it's
trust is a wicked thing, isn't it?
oh,
Trust and safety, you know, it's like you just can't feel safe because you don't trust. And without that safety, it's like you can't open up. And if you can't open up, then people don't know who you are. And if they don't know who you are, they can't get in a relationship with you. So it's just this evil spiral, right? It's just crazy.
oh, true. In fact, the one book I need to put on my profile there, I just released, Brave Enough to Stop Disappearing, which is talking about people pleasing and, showing up for yourself, finally showing up for yourself, stop disappearing from life but in there, that's exactly one thing I say is that you are you're and I realized that through all my dating experience too, and even looking back on my life, I was trying so hard to be somebody I wasn't that people didn't even know who I was. I mean, I was hiding myself from trying to be okay, we went from the butterfly, let's go to the chameleon. You're changing around everybody so that you just blend in with who they are and try to be what pleases them. And the thing is you're robbing people of the beauty of who you actually are, and we don't look at it that way. We want approval. We want love. And, we
You said something too. You said a lot of really great stuff, but the one thing that really hit me was when your daughter went off, and you said, "Is this the way I want to live the rest of my life?" And that's such a massive question. It's so freaking scary because the repercussions of the answer to that question will tear your whole world apart. So we're so fearful of the answer to that. So you go, is this the way I want to live the rest of my life? And we know the answer to it because otherwise you wouldn't be asking the question, right? If you're completely content and everything's rosy, you don't ask yourself that question.
No.
So the scary part is I'm gonna have to answer this, and then what do I do then? Right?
Exactly, exactly. And I think an almost easier question, I mean, that certainly starts the thinking, but then what I have been using now in my book writing and in my, the groups that I have with women I have 2 questions that kinda come out of that, and one of them is, "Who do I want to be?" Because I think that opens up the door to dreaming about who you wanna be. And secondly, who tells me who I am?
That's a good one.
Because, so many people are allowing other people to say, "Well, that's not good enough. You're not good enough. You need to be like this and this to measure up." And I mean, I lived under that weight my entire life. And now that I've started to say, and I defined it actually. I defined that and I answered that question. Who tells me who I am? And I came down to 2 people, me and God. That's it. Because I answered to myself because I know what my standards are. I know what my values are. And I know what feels right in my life. And so I need to then, once I know that, I need to stand up for myself and protect that. And I also have been made for a reason. So my creator has a play in this because he put me there in the beginning and you talked about being born, kicking and screaming, not coming out, but you do come out with all your gifts and your
Yes, you do.
personality and your interests. Like, I believe they're all there inside you. And that's the person we need to get to know as we walk this whole path of life. And that's who we stand up for. And so that answering that. Who like, even my parents don't get to tell me who I am. Like, their job really is to help me understand who is this child that was born into my family. I mean, my mom was always shaking her head at me like, "I do not get you." Because, you know, but I mean,
Well,
that's
that brings me back to the other amazing thing you said, of all the amazing things you said, but it's just so powerful. And I know you work a lot with women, and because I'm 63, I have a lot of, gals that are my age that are single, and dating was crazy. But you said I won't accept anything less. And that's such a powerful statement. If we can honestly get ourselves to believe it, number one, but number two, to know what the heck we actually want. So we could say, well, we won't accept anything less, but what is it we do want, right? That's why we have tiny little steps right here. That's why we have the books.
Yeah, because and it's so true. People don't in the I know it, like whenever I have actually and I have to say probably 85% of people, 90% of people I've coached or worked with or had conversations like this, when the question comes up, what do you want? What do you really want? They cannot answer because we don't have the permission in our I don't know if it's our society or our families or who gives us that permission, like, or who took that permission away from us to be able to say, "This is what I want." Have you ever heard of, Dan Sullivan? He
Oh
is
yeah, yeah.
amazing,
Got
and what he has written, one of his little books that he wrote, and that's kinda where I started to get the idea for writing my little books of courage because he was doing that for supporting his coaching, his concepts. But one of his books is, something about wanting what you want, and I listened to what he was teaching about that. You have it?
yeah, yeah. I've got a couple of his books. Yeah,
I
I think the one I've gone through the most. I think it's titled something like uh, who you were supposed to be or something like that. I have to go. But I've got a bunch of his books, and it's just what you're talking about. It's breaking it down of the person you were meant to be or something like that, right?
Yeah.
It's to break it down, but I don't want to cut off your thought. Go ahead. Go ahead, guy. You already
No,
got a train
and
of thought
right
going.
along with that comes
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to even find out who you are, because so many people think that's so lofty, like, "Who am I supposed to be?" Yikes, that's such a scary question. But you only get to the answer to that by figuring out going in your heart and asking, "What is it I really want?" Like, even when I came out of my marriage and when I was coaching women in relationships, one of the things that I had to go through was to write a list of 100 things that I wanted. And places I wanted to visit, not just like a bucket list, but I want this kind of house. I want this kind of car. I like this color. I don't like that color. I like this food. I don't like that food. It's as simple as that, and I guess those are tiny brave steps, like, to really figure out what is it that you want, and like Dan Sullivan says, without apologizing for it, without
Yeah.
any explanation for why you want that. That is how that list has to be. That's how you have to determine what it is you want. You just say, "I want this, period." You know how hard that is,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I want this because we think because this and this and this, or, it feels like this, or what. You need to get, I think this is one of the things about being really assertive and protecting yourself is to say, no, I want Chinese food. My husband wants,
I wish my wife would say that. I wish she would say, I've stopped asking what you want to eat. I just stopped. I said, we're gonna go get Chinese food.
yeah. Okay.
Um, yeah,
Did you see
where's
that's one of the rules of dating is that when a man asks you, where do you want to eat? Tell him because
tell
he
him.
just wants to make you happy.
Oh my God, just tell me. Just tell me. That has to do with everything in a marriage. Sex, food, communication, vacation. Just tell me. I swear I'll do it. Yeah.
I
Right.
know, it is so true, and that's simple.
Yeah,
But
so simple. I love vision boards. I think going back to one of the questions you asked a little bit earlier before we got into Dan Sullivan is, I think we don't take time, we don't have peace, and we're never quiet. So we can't listen to our voice. We say, why don't we in today's world, why don't we sit and write these things? Why don't we manifest what we want? Why don't we do vision boards? Where we used to, when we had magazines, I used to cut out pages of magazine, put them on my wall and create vision boards. I've got stuff right now up on my wall here in my office. But you know, there's something about stepping back with one of your great books, right? And going through it and finding some peace and some quiet so you can clear your mind to really find out what you want. And as I was going through just the beginning of your books, I just love the steps that you put in there, the kindness that you put in there. You had
Mhm.
very specific steps, and then you gave little quiet moments. I don't remember what they call it. I don't think they're called. What did you call them? Where you got a little you
There's,
pulled it aside.
heart moments.
Yes,
Oh, I can't
that's
yeah,
yes.
no.
It's your book. But yeah, you pull it to the
Wisdom,
side
yeah.
and yeah, and you say, "Okay, now take a second, and how did that make you feel? What do you?" And I loved that. And that's when I said, "Buy it." That's when I
That's so
bought.
good. Thank you for telling me that because, that was really what I wanted these books to be. I wanted them to have lots of white space. I wanted them to be, you know, books where it's not filled with instruction, but rather because we have enough theory in our world, I wanted it to be something practical, like a journey, like walking along a path and actually experiencing who you are for one thing in those quiet moments. But then also to really think like not what I want you to be and not what even the top psychological influencers want you to be, but rather, how are you made? Who are you? And because it always comes back to that center, from there, you decide what you believe. From there, you decide what you're going to do next. From there, you decide, how you receive other people's opinions of you. Like there's just so many things that can become something that strengthen you when you come from that place inside that is truly you. And when you're always thinking about that, who am I? Who do I want to be?
The way you take us to the journey, and I liked that the books are titled Journey, and I like the way that you put your steps. Like you said, I don't know who Fred is, but how to befriend fear. We're going to talk about Fred.
Yeah.
The tiny brave steps method. How to see the hidden gold in hard things. Wow, have I gone through that the last 5 years? How to stop fighting life and start working with it. How to reset in 90 seconds. I mean, those are just, the basic kind of titles, but why pain often reveals your greatest strengths and how to find yours. I mean, if that's the only thing I read of all that stuff, I would have been a winner because, wow, we're going through a lot of really challenging things. And it's so easy to look at them like we talked about the boulders, look at them as painful experiences that you can't overcome and, oh, you're totally screwed, and saying, no, 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 no. I'm going to make this my power. And I really like that approach.
Yeah. I don't think wow. You know, I have had to come to that perspective because otherwise I would be crushed. Like and I believe this is one way I'm made is I'm hypersensitive. I am so intuitive. I can talk with somebody and feel their heart right now. I can hear what's behind their words. I can feel when they're going through pain, and when they're being honest. That's just part of who I am. So that because of that, one of the things that can happen is that I could become somebody, and I struggle with this all the time, who takes on too much or who feels everything inside. So, and I believe that's why I had to come to this conclusion that, yeah, okay, all these hard things that are happening, it's like I'm walking on this path. a person all on my own, and all around me, things happen. Stuff happens. I don't have any say in that. I don't often have any control about what comes at me. What the only thing I can do is control how I respond to it. And one of the ways I respond to it is to say, who do I want to be in the middle of this situation? And then see that it's actually helping me to become more of that person. That's the gold that comes out of anything that you walk through. It's tough. It's tough. It's like being in a war. I mean, when you're in a war, you don't have any choice. You're out there fighting. You don't control what's coming at you. You just decide what your strategy is, right? And so,
Yeah.
and you become better or you die in that case. And we life is an opportunity, and this is something I don't know if I'm unique in this, but I believe that by the end of the path, looking back, the way that we look back and feel as if we gave it everything we had was to see how strong we became because we went through those things and how well we developed as a person. Because I think it's about character and about becoming everything you're meant to be as you go through it. And it's not like, people get really angry, "Well, why do we have to go through all this hard stuff? Why?" We hear that so much, whether it's politics, whether it's, life circumstances, our kids getting sick, our husbands dying, our wives dying, you know, um, all of these things. It's like, "Why does this have to happen to me? Somebody's got it out for me." No, you're just walking through a war zone and stuff happens. You just decide, who are you in the middle of that? What is that gooey person inside that cocoon? You know, because I mean, you don't have to stay the gooey person forever either.
No,
Part
no, I don't plan on it.
because the strength actually comes when you start to see yourself as the butterfly and
Mm.
say, "Wow, I have learned so much and I have become so much through everything I've been through." Another Dan Sullivan thing, actually, the gap and the gain. Looking back grows you to go forward, and say, wow, I got through that and I came out alive. That's a courage story. you know?
I like to tell people that, without massive extreme heat and pressure, you can't make a diamond,
Yeah.
right? And if you want to become that diamond, one of the most incredible, whatever it is, emeralds, gems, mineral, whatever the heck a diamond is, um, the process of it is wicked tough, right? Whether it's a butterfly coming the goo or an oyster, what an oyster goes through. I mean, it's
Yeah,
so funny when the oyster, I mean, think about just this irritating sand rubbing your most sensitive spots for months so you can
I
create an
know.
oyster or carrying a baby. Men have no idea, right? We get the sniffles when we're in bed for like 3 weeks crying. And women pump out a baby while they're milking a cow and they're it's like
Carrying on with everything normal. Yeah, yeah, no matter what. Yeah, there's so many metaphors for it, isn't there? And yet we miss it. We miss
Yeah.
that. I know I really studied that when the diamond thing. Went back, well, I think I homeschooled my kids, so crazy woman that I am, but anyways, it was
Smart. That was
quite an
smart.
experience, yeah. But anyways, that's when I kinda started to look at diamonds. And the fact that where do they come from? Deep in the ground, and they're spit up onto the earth, but only when they're diamonds already or already in the rough. But yeah, that heat and pressure that has to happen in order to make the diamond. Same with gold. When you put gold in a pot and heat it up and melt it, that's the only way the impurities come to the top where you can skim it off. And I've often looked at my life like that. It's like, that's why I ask, like, who do I want to be here? It's like, I don't want to be this angry person. I don't want to be this jealous person. I don't want to resent this or that or this. So you take a pause and you stop and you think, well, who do I want to be? I want to be gracious. I want to be loving. I want to be strong enough to defend myself and yet to offer grace to somebody else to be who they are and to be going through what they're going through. So how can I do that? That's like the fire heating up the gold and then the impurities have to come off because you say, well, I'm not quite there yet. I still got to become a develop that character a little bit more. And this is an opportunity to do that.
And that's where the difference comes in of like we're talking about, where we close ourselves off, you know? You're protecting yourself, but you're really not. You're keeping yourself from living, you're keeping yourself from experiencing. You're keeping yourself it's like, well, I just won't leave the house so I don't get hurt, or I won't date so because he's just gonna break my heart again or cheat on me
Yeah.
or this or that or the other thing. And we look for other things to fill that void, food, booze, drinking, gambling, whatever, you know what I mean? Which isn't the best way to fill that void, right?
No. And this is the perfect time to talk about Fred, because what you've
Yeah,
described is
who's
exactly who
from
Fred is. And I'll just quickly tell you where that came from. That was when I got into dating. And I was listening to a relationship coach I was following at that time, bought her book, devoured her book. She said, when you're gonna
whose
feel
book was it?
it was, her name is Rory Ray. I don't even know if she's coaching anymore, and it's called Have the Relationship You Want, and that was, back a few years. Anyways, she said, "You are going to feel fear, and fear is going to tell you to be afraid. You are going to feel it, but what I want you to do is I want you to look that fear in the eye, and I want you to say, 'Thank you very much for trying to protect me from getting hurt.' But I want you to go over there in the corner and eat a cookie. I'll still hear you nattering away because I know you're gonna worry, but I have to go out here and do this thing. If I'm ever gonna find love again, I gotta get out there and date." And it applies. I have like I also listened to Elizabeth Gilbert's book, Big Magic. And a few years later, I listened to that book and she brought up the same kind of concept about fear. She said so many creative people are afraid to put their work out there. You're afraid to, because what is that voice telling you? Oh, you're going to get stomped on. Nobody's going to like your stuff. You don't have any talent. You're just thinking you do. So, she said she faced fear. She looked him in the eye and she said, "Thank you very much for trying to protect me." And she actually wrote a letter to her fear. And she said, "I know you are always going to be here. I know it. And you are welcome to be here in my life. But you can come, you can ride with me in the car, but you will never be driving. I will always be driving." And so, whether you picture Fred in the corner eating a cookie or you picture him in the back seat, like your old worried aunt, worrying about everything that happens because, oh my goodness, you are going to fail. You are going to fall on your face. Like this totally changed my relationship with fear. And I began to see fear more as an advisor, more as a caution voice to say, hey, something really matters to you here because it's bringing up this fear in you. So listen to what that voice is saying. What are you afraid of? And so when you really think of it, you say, oh, I'm afraid that they're going to laugh at me. I'm afraid that I am, you know, not I mean, I went through this every book you put out there. It's like, "Oh, nobody's gonna like it anyways," but as I say, so and it keeps so many people from writing and so many people from actually finishing their work. And but you have to say, "Thank you very much for the warning." It's true. I might fall on my face. I might be the worst writer on the planet, but I still need to go ahead and do this anyway because I need to grow and I need to explore this. So that
I love
Fred,
that.
now I teach
That's
all my
Fred.
ladies that I work with, that's your Fred voice, your fear Fred voice talking. What's it saying? What are you afraid of? Now,
Yeah.
what you need to do is ask yourself, who do you wanna be in this situation? And then out of that person, that when you decide who you want to be, that's where the steps come. That's where you take your next step.
Love that. Love it, love it, love it. You know, Zig Ziglar said so many great things, and you just made me think of two of them. And one of them is, uh, don't die with your music still in you.
Oh, that's a beautiful one, isn't
I
it?
love that one. I think about it all the time because it's so true because we doubt ourselves so much, like you're saying. The other thing is we could either say false evidence appearing real, or we can say face everything and rise. I mean, there's so many acronyms for fear, right? But you bring, when you're talking about dating, it reminds me after my wife passed and I got in another relationship. And I've been with my wife for 28 years. I mean, we were babies when we got together, right? She was like 18 and I was 21 or something. And so I haven't been with another woman for, 30 years by the time I met
Yeah.
this gal. So when we decided to be intimate after dating for a while, I'm like, I don't know what to do. I
Yeah,
have no idea what I'm doing. So if you wouldn't mind helping a brother out because
yeah.
I'm scared to death. I don't
Oh,
know. I've been with the same woman for 30. I don't know what I'm doing. I mean, it's even just all the different fears, right? I mean, just going to have a drink with somebody for the first time, it's like,
yeah.
what do we talk about? What do I say? Do I open up? I mean, right? It's just, oh, this fear of all this stuff can make us
Stay
mad. It
home.
could just make us crazy. That's why we need Fred. But I'm going to bring duct tape because I don't want him in the back seat whining and while I'm trying to
Yeah.
duct tape Fred.
The thing that you have to learn, I think, and I man, when I think of it, as I've been, trying to put this into practice, I can let fear come up. I feel it. That's what the 90-second rule is, or the 90-second pause. It's like, okay, something happens, you're afraid. You're, you know, you're going to be intimate with a woman and you're afraid. Let yourself feel the fear. Because actually it's scientifically proven if you wait for about 90 seconds, emotion rises up and reaches its peak, and then it will, unless you keep feeding it, it will recede again. So you've got that little window of time and then you decide what you're going to do. So in that, like I realize I do that, uh, you know, multiple 100 times a day probably. Something will come up as I'm working or whatever and say, "Oh, what if this? What if that?" There's that fear voice. What if? Because it's always questioning. So you stop right there, you let that be, and then you say, "Well, who do I want to be here? Do I want to let it stop me? Do I let that stop me, the possibility of that happening? Or do I go ahead and do it anyway because I'm going to learn something and I need to grow?" And so, I mean, it doesn't matter if you're with a woman or if you're going for a drink or if you are, whatever you learn from every experience. And if you don't actually take the steps to do it, you are never going to learn anything because you'll just stay stuck. You'll stay, like you were saying, in your house, the blinds down, or in your bed with your covers up over your head, and you will just stop living. And what kind of life is that?
We don't want that kind of life, right? We don't want that kind of life. And that's why, one of my favorite things to say, and I said it to my boys growing up, and it used to scare the poop out of my wife, is I'd always say, they say, "Should we do it?" I'm like, "What's the worst that can happen? Let's do it." What's the worst that can happen? We burn the house down with the Christmas tree. I mean, I've just always said that. What's the worst that can happen? I don't know. Let's give it a try. And the other thing that you made me think of, when we try to face our fears and we go after just, the saying about the devil showed up and said, "I'm going to bring the storm," and you look at the devil and say, "I am the storm." And you just empower yourself to go, "You know
Yeah.
what? I don't care what you bring. I don't care. I am going to go and do it." And what's the hot air balloon thing? Didn't you have the
That
hot air
again
balloon thing?
came out of
Uh,
the dating experience because and just real quick, I during that time, it was, what this coach taught me, she said, and this was all through reading, I wasn't personally, involved with her at all, but what she said was, because I was thinking there were no good men left out there, right? Send me your knight in shining armor. Are there no knights in shining armor out there? So she said, when those kinds of things come, think about getting into a hot air balloon and just rising up above your situation. Look down. You can see the path you came from, you can see the path you're going, but what you're going to see is that there are hundreds of men out there looking for a woman just like you. So you need to just be patient and you need to keep looking. And it turned out it was so right. Well, I have used that perspective so many times. You know, we're stuck on the ground looking at one thing. And like we were talking about, being in front of that boulder that we can't get around. If all you see is that boulder, you're stuck. Now imagine getting in that hot air balloon, rising up off the ground and looking down. You can see that the water flows around the boulder. You can see that there are other options. And we need to give ourselves that opportunity to be able to go up, have a look at the lay of the land, see what did we do in the past when something like this came up? How did we get through that? Look at who we want to be in the future and the potential of getting past this situation. There will be opportunities there that maybe we can't see now. But right now in the present, okay. Ah, looking down here, I can see this path. I can see this possibility. I can see this happening. And, it just expands our whole vision of where we're at rather than being stuck behind that boulder where that's all we see.
That's why I love flow so much, and because water will find its way.
Yeah.
I don't care what you put in water's path.
Yeah.
Water will find its way. So when you find flow, and that's why my focus was, I've just got to get my flow back. I'm still working on it 12 years later. Um, but just that
It's okay.
flow, water finds its way. It just always will. You have to just let that flow open that up.
Be
But
the water.
you've been amazing, kiddo. This hour is just absolutely blown by, and I promised I'd get you out of here in an hour. But I have one last question, if that's okay, if you have time
Sure.
for one last question. I lied earlier because I'm a dude. There's no good dudes out there. Um, I said I had one question, but I actually have two questions. I give you the what if you could question, but I don't give you the second question. The second question is, uh you know, Bernice, if there's something that you'd like to leave us with, if there's a message or a thought or something that really means something to you that you'd like to leave us with before we sign off, what would that last thought be?
Well, a quote. That has absolutely changed my life and been the foundation for me doing many scary things in my life. And it's by Ambrose Redmoon. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He was a very obscure writer. Way back in the 60s, and wasn't famous for very much. But one thing he said was something that's similar to what we hear from a lot of influencers in politics, etc. But it's courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the judgment that something is more important than the fear. And when I think of it, it's really how I live my life. They ha- you have to make that judgment call. What Yeah, you feel afraid, but what is more important here? What's your judgment that something is more important than the fear that you feel? And when you can get a hold of that fear, when you can become the boss of your fear, the boss of Fred, as I tell people, then you can move mountains. You can do things you never, ever thought you could ever do. And the growth that comes from that is phenomenal. You won't even know yourself in a year.
Mm, that is powerful because let's face it, your person, your soul, the person who you are is so much more important than anything that you could possibly fear. because 90% of the things we fear don't even come true. They're not even real.
Yeah.
There's a lot of real fear out there, right, Bernice? I mean, there just is. But I mean, 90% of the things we fear just don't even come true. So that's a beautiful saying. I'm going to look that up and print that out and put it, add it to another saying on my wall.
It's a wonderful one.
British, you've been awesome.
Mm.
I'm just so grateful for this. So everybody, we've had a moment with Bernice McDonald. Please look for her Tiny Brave Steps method. Look for her Little Books of Courage series. Brave Enough to Be Myself and Brave Enough to Let Go. Also, the creator of the Tiny Brave Steps generator. So, Bernice, where can we find more Bernice? How can we get more of Bernice? We love all this Bernice. We want more Bernice. Where can we get it?
Well, you can go tinybravesteps.com is my website, so you can find it all there. And my generator, I have to say, is my own AI that I created. Oh, I'm sorry. An alarm going off. The Tiny Brave Steps generator is an AI that I created specifically for when anybody has a thing they're working through and they need a step. And it actually will work through it with you emotionally and logistically. And in the end, it'll give you one, if not three very small steps to take next. So that is kind of like my treasure chest of, you know, transformation. You could go there and never be stuck again.
I love that. And what's the website again? One more time. I'll put it on there, but I just want to say,
tinybravesteps.com.
love it, love it, love it, love it. Tinybravesteps.com. Bernice McDonald, you've been absolutely amazing. This has been so much fun. It flew
Oh,
by. Can't I can't wait to get your books. I got one for my wife. I got one for me.
aw,
Gonna
you
do a
let me know
deep
what you think.
dive. Well, we'll have you back on, and I'm gonna say, all right, I've got more questions.
All right.
All right, my friend, you've been amazing. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you soon. Bye.